Okay, so we had three breakout questions on the table. First of which, what is the thesis for the reading? Two, what does the wisdom teaching say about the society that produced said teachings? And then finally, what wisdom teaching stood out most to you, or what was your favorite wisdom teaching? Who would like to talk about what they discussed as the thesis of the text?
Our group talked a lot about how the overall take that we got from the reading was to live a very humble life and a very kind life in moderation of your own ego and the things that you take out of want and need in general, and to kind of bring awareness to our future posterity and to get them on the right track with our lessons and to live moral lives.
Perfect. Thank you. Anyone else? What was the thesis of the text?
My group also talked about the same thing. Um we kind of got the idea that like the more you don't talk about what you have and everything that you do have, the more people want what you have and kind of like look up to you, and rather than if you're like flaunting what you have and saying that you're better than everybody else, like no one's gonna want to be you even though you are in a good path.
Get one more for the thesis and we'll move on. Go ahead.
I I kind of thought that it was overall just to remain humble to succeed gracefully.
Mm.
That's kind of what I got from all of them, was to kind of just like remain humble, remain to yourself, don't give in to that temptation to like to reach someone's level or to kind of get on someone's level, even though at the like in the reality it's lower than what you could have gone, you know?
This idea of like keeping up with the Joneses, or like the
Yeah.
off of what someone else may have. Yes, it's a good call out.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So, what does the wisdom teaching say about the ancient Kemetic society that produced the wisdom teachings? What are the values of some of the society? Go ahead, Michelle.
So what I've read so far, um, well, not to get all biblical, but this reminds me of the Ten Commandments, and basically, thou shalt be humble. Um, when looking at these rules, it tells me that the society was messy. It was kind of like our society today, where people are talking about each other behind one another's back. People are putting words in other people's mouths. Jealousy is running rampant. It, it's history repeating itself. To me, is what I see.
So, we are the repeat of that previous history. Is that what you're saying, Michelle?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
All right. Go ahead.
Oh, number six stood out to me because they said if you meet a disputant in action, one who is your equal, one who is on your level, you will overcome him by being silent while he is speaking evilly. And that stood out to me because I think that it represented that this tribe stood on their morals more than anything, because if they were so hell bent on not being taken out of their character by another, undeserving entity. And that shocked me because like it's something that I personally like talk about all the time, like not giving undeserving people your energy. Like when it has something to pertain to that, like it's all about how you move. And if they're going, like, you can't let them take you off of like your frequency, if that makes sense. And I think that's what it is. Like they're all about morals, and they're all about how other people view, especially like deeper in the paragraph they say other people throughout the I don't want to say village, but throughout the area that they are in, other people will look at you in high regard. And I see that as like how we look at more people in power who stand on their morals, who have a backbone, per se.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's more so of like they just stand on their morals.
So their morals are highly valued in the society.
Yeah, highly valued.
Anyone else? What does the teaching say about this society and what they value? Michelle points us to what was going on, right, and why we need to have these instructions. We're also is it Aziza? Is that how you pronounce that?
Isaiah.
Isaiah, okay, excuse me. Isaiah points us to morals, right? So the need to be moral is of high regard within this society. What else is also valued? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Also, I wanted to touch on, I noticed that they talk about self a lot. So I think that individuality is what was a big theme for them. Because with our current time and what Michelle said, with our current time, I think that the problem is so many of us operate on hive mindsets, and we see, I don't know, we operate in groups of like and do acts of hatred as like, this is cool, this is funny, this is who we are. But it's, if you know what I mean, like it's hard to explain it, but they're really preaching individuality. Like, don't feed into this hatred that's being normalized. Be yourself. Go within your own, yeah, your
Okay.
own moral standpoint.
Are you trying to say something along the lines of, um, what do you think of what you want? Think of yourself.
Yeah,
I'm a theater major, and the whole focus is don't think of what other people want. Think of what you want. Think of
yeah,
what you feel is comfortable to you. So I think what you're saying is, these teachings are saying be yourself. Don't think of don't do what other people are doing. Don't monkey see monkey do. Do what
yeah,
you
no,
want. Yeah.
Which is called groupthink. Don't fall into
yeah.
groupthink. Okay. What were some of your favorite wisdom teachings? What would you argue are some of your favorite wisdom teachings? Or what stood out to you most?
I was telling my group that the 17th teaching stood out to me. Um, the reason it stood out to me is because it speaks on really listening to someone. Um, I think too often we are waiting our turn or ready to cut someone off or thinking about what we're going to reply to what someone is saying, as opposed to just truly listening and hearing what someone else has to say and therefore doing justice for what they want to say. I think they speak on if you are one who stops who is pleading, that person will say, "Why does he reject my plea?" Right? So it's like you're trying to communicate and speak to someone and you feel rejected when they're here. They're waiting their turn. Are going to cut you off. That stood out to me.
Yeah, good call out. Thank you. Anyone else? Michelle?
I remember.
I'm sorry, we'll go to Messiah, then Michelle. We heard from Michelle. Go ahead, Messiah.
I think that the first one actually really stood out to me because I think it shows the society's values as well as just a great teaching in general. Don't be arrogant with your knowledge and don't act better than people because you know things that they don't.
Yeah,
And it shows that the society also valued knowledge, and I think that's kind of interesting.
yeah, good call out. Thank you. Michelle?
Um, I like rule number 6. Do not scheme against people. God will punish accordingly. If a man says, I shall live by scheming, he will lack bread for his mouth. If a man says, I will be rich, he will have to say, my cleverness has trapped me. Um, that one rings out so much because in today's societies, and you see it in families too, where there's you family members that are or friends that scheme against each other, and then it doesn't go quite well for them, or um I don't want to get all political, but you see what's going on with Donald Trump, what he's done in the past when he wanted to quote unquote get back and seek revenge on the Democrats, and now he's standing trial for his treason. So I don't know where I was going with this. I was going somewhere.
You're scheming. Trump was scheming. So you fall short.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Who else? Favorite wisdom teaching?
The first one stood out to me because when it said don't be proud and arrogant with your knowledge, because there's a lot of people that'll like they'll like criticize something, but like they won't like share what they know to like help correct someone, but they'll just like judge instead of like putting them on.
Yeah, it's a good call out. Thank you. Gianna?
I really liked number 35. From what I took away from the little passage was that we share our successes with our friends, and they, the people around you and the people that care about you are so much more important than earthly possessions. And that it's so important to be good to the people around you, because if you're putting out negative energy, then that negative energy is just going to come back to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Gabriel? I think you're on mute still, man.
My bad.
That's cool.
My favorite was number 9, because it said if you plow and you have growth, don't be greedy and try boasting about it with your neighbor. And another example that it also gave was that if you have the ability to have children, also don't boast about it, don't be vain about it. God doesn't appreciate that and would prefer much more silence than boasting about it because that is a sin.
Anyone else want to share their favorite teaching or something that stood out? All right. So we'll get into my notes on the reading. So what you read was this book here, The Teachings of Patthotep, the oldest book in the world. And I want to authenticate why this is the oldest book in the world and kind of argue this claim. But before we do that, I want to point this fact out. Largely when you're talking about African history, it's a misconception that African history is strictly a oral history, right? They'll tell you that the way that African people passed down their folklore was strictly through storytelling. Now, this is true, but this is not the only way. And this book here dispels the myth that the only way that African people charted their history was through the oral tradition, right? This is a book of wisdom teachings, right? So this means that these teachings were written down. Says the Meter Neter is Africa's and the world's oldest recorded writing system. What is important about the Meter Neter is that there is no evidence of a developmental period. This writing system simply appears fully developed as it must have existed ages before either Kemet or Tasseti came into being. The existence of this writing alone is testimonial to the development of early civilization in ancient Hapti, or what you call the Nile Valley, right? So the Meter Neter is what you all would think of when you hear like the hieroglyphics, right? So like those inscriptions on the temples, on the pyramids of Kemet, which you would call the hieroglyphics, are actually called the Metu Neter, okay? And it says it's the world's oldest writing system, right? Not only Africa's oldest writing system, but it's the world's oldest writing system. And it's important that this particular writing system never has a developmental period, or there's no evidence of a developmental period. So when the Metu Neter arrives on the scene, it arrives on the scene fully constructed and in completion, right? So if like in our world, if we're thinking about technology, right, you have like that beta stage, right? We're gonna kind of like test it out to see how things work, and then you actually release the actual software, right? There was no beta stage for the Metu Neter. It comes fully cultivated and fully developed. And this is significant because the author argues this is so because this writing system was in place prior to Kemet, right? This writing system predates Kemet, predates what we call Tasseti, right, which is the lower half of Kemet, or what you may call Nubia. It says that the instructions of Patthotep were copied during the Middle Kingdom on papyri that is still preserved. Some Egyptologists believe that because the instructions were attributed to Patthotep, and because there was indeed an Old Kingdom sage by that name, and because Middle Kingdom writers attributed the sayings to that sage, who is said to have served under King Asa of the 5th dynasty. Therefore, they should accept that attribution in the absence of compelling evidence to the contrary. So to interpret that, right, to put that in layman's terms. This book was copied on papyri, right? And they know, Egyptologists know that there was this cat named Patthotep, right? He was a sage, like a priest, right? And he served under King Asa in the 5th dynasty, right? And he says that, we have to believe this to be true because there is no evidence that counter this. There's no evidence that says that this is false. So we can assume or glean this to be true, right? But then check it out. It says, even if it was Middle Kingdom material at an age of the 12th dynasty. So we think it's 5th dynasty, but we'll give you some grace and we'll say, even if it's 12th dynasty, right? It would still be approximately 2000 BC. It would still be the oldest wisdom literature in the world. So even if it's a 12th dynasty text, it would still be produced around 2000 BC, still making it the oldest book in the world. Wisdom literature in the world, excuse me. Given a 5th dynastic age, we can say that the instructions of Patthotep belong to a period approximately 2,500 years before Christ, right? So given that it exists within that 5th dynasty, then we could offer it's around 2,500 years before Christ. This is how the author, confirms the fact that this is indeed the oldest wisdom literature in the world, right? So looking at the opening page, and he states very clearly what the thesis is in the opening page. At the bottom of the first full paragraph, the second full paragraph, it states, may your servant, and this is the words of Patthotep, may your servant be authorized to use the status of old age to teach the hearers so as to tell them the words of those who have listened to the ways of our ancestors and of those who have listened to the gods. May I do this for you so that strife may be banned from among our people and so that the two shores may serve you. So right there, we can locate our thesis. I want to do this so that strife may be banned from our people. Now, what is strife? What does it mean to have strife?
Conflict.
Conflict, perfect. Thank you, Roberto. So this is kind of going back to what Michelle was talking about, right? They was gossiping, they was talking shit, they had each other's names in their mouth, right? This is why Patthotep says we need to create these instructions so that we can eliminate conflict from our land, right? But he says, let me use the wisdom that old age affords you, right? And we know, well, in the book, it says that Patthotep is about 110 years old when he makes the wisdom teachings, right? So he wrote these at 110 years old. So he's saying, let me use my 110 years of experience, right? To teach the listeners, those who are willing to listen, the words and the ways of our ancestors, the words and the ways of those who listen to the gods. And let me do this so that we can eliminate conflict from our land and so that the two shores may serve you. This is his thesis. This is why he wants to produce these wisdom teachings. So now that we know the thesis, I'm sorry, go ahead. Somebody had a question?
I was gonna say, so these because listening to this, it does sound very close to the Bible, and this is taking place before Christianity, right?
Absolutely.
So did the Romans adapt this teaching, the African teachings, into their Bible?
I would say you're pretty fucking smart, Michelle. Yeah, that's exactly what happened, right? Like this is their attempt to, and keep in mind, right? Think of it this way. So you have like these explorations that take place, right? They called Africa the dark continent. They didn't know really what to expect in Africa, right? Through the writings and the journals of like Aristotle and Plato, they know that this one location in Africa is where all of their Western philosophers go to get their knowledge, right? So they're going to travel down there and try to see what these philosophers saw. And one thing that we'll learn about Kemet, it has various different times where different people ruled it. And one of the individuals who ruled Kemet were the Europeans, right? And when they ruled Kemet and they called it Egypt, they allowed their priests, their philosophers to go into these temples, try to copy out the hieroglyphics or the Neter Neter, or even just take out them, just chop them out of the wall as a whole, right? And then make their interpretation of what they believe that these things meant, right? And then this interpretation gives us things that we know as like the Bible, right? So yes, you're absolutely astute in gleaning that these wisdom teachings are very, very much similar to the Bible, but naturally these predate the Bible. So we have to assume that the Greco-European empire snatched these from the Bible. Sorry, snatched these from the ancient Kemetic temples. Yes. So we know the thesis is to eliminate strife, right? But how do you go about eliminating strife? And he tells us on the next page. And so begins the formulation of Metu Nefer. So we know the Metu Nefer is the hieroglyphics, right? It's the writing system. But the Metu Nefer, in MDW NFR, Metu Nefer means good speech. And good speech is how Patthotep seeks to eliminate strife, right? And so begins the formulation of Metu Nefer, good speech, to be spoken by the prince, the count, God's beloved, the eldest son of the Pharaoh, the son of his body, mayor of the city, and vizier. So all of these people, right? The prince, the count, God's beloved, the eldest son of the Pharaoh, the son of his body, the mayor of the city, and vizier. Are these normal people? Are these the oligarchy, the royalty, the elite? Who are these people?
The hierarchy. I mean, not hierarchy. The higher ups.
Right, the elites, right? The higher.
Yes.
Yes. So these are the people who need to have good speech, right? Patthotep instructs the ignorant in the knowledge and in the standards of good speech. It will profit those who hear. It will be a loss to those who transgress. Patthotep begins to speak to the Pharaoh's son to prosperity, right? So I'm going to teach those in power how to produce, how to engage in good speech, right? So we know what the thesis is. We know how he's going to go about manifesting his thesis. Then he goes into his wisdom teachings. Good speech, Metu Nefer, is more hidden than greenstones or emeralds. Yet it may be found among the maids at the grindstones. So he's telling you, like, yo, it is hard to find his good speech. In fact, it's hidden. It's as hard as it is to find a diamond, right? It's as hard as it is to find an emerald. But where you may find good speech is among the maids. So why do you think the maids may be the ones to possess good speech? Why would it be the maids? Go ahead, Gianna.
I think someone like a maid would be less corrupt and might have more might have experienced life in a more humble way and maybe actually experienced life rather than someone that's higher up that might have been pampered their whole life, never maybe even washed their own clothes. So
Yes, I think that's exactly why, right? And just to kind of can reduce what you're saying down a little bit, humility, right? If you're a maid, you're gonna possess a layer of humility, right? And what she also points out is that, you know, if you're someone who is elite, you're someone who's privileged. You don't know what real life is, right? And I think you're absolutely correct. Going into number 2, if you meet a disputant in the heat of action, one who is more powerful than you, simply fold your arms and bend your back. To confront him will not make him agree with you. Pay no attention to his evil utterance, or to his evil speech. If you do not confront him while he is raging, people will call him ignoramus. Your self-control will be the match for his evil utterance. So in other words, you and your boss having an argument, you and your manager having an argument, it makes no use to argue back. Simply fold your arms, bend your back. You can't convince him. But your silence will make him look foolish, right? People will be able to observe his evil utterances and your capacity to keep self-control, right? Number 3, if you meet a disputant in action, one who is your equal, one who is on your level, you will overcome him by being silent while he is speaking evilly. There will be much talk among those who hear, and your name will be held in high regard. If you meet a disputant in action who is a poor man and who is not your equal, do not attack him because he is weak. Leave him alone. He will confound himself. Do not answer him just so that you can relieve your own heart. Do not answer him just so you can relieve your own heart. Do not vent yourself against your opponent. Wretched is the man who injures a poor man. If you ignore him, listeners will wish to do what you want. You will beat him through their reproof, excuse me. So if you meet a disputant who is above you, what do you do? If you're in an argument with someone who is above you, your superior, what do you do?
Nothing.
You stop talking.
Shut the fuck up, right? If you meet a disputant who is your equal in an argument, what do you do?
Shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up, right? If you meet an argument, if you're in an argument with someone who is below you, what's up, bro? What do?
Shut the fuck up,
Shut the
obviously.
fuck up, right? So if you're in an argument, according to the teachings of Patthotep, you're instructed to just shut the fuck up. This is how we maintain a strifeless society. This is how we avoid conflict. Someone has to be the bigger person. Someone has to kill their ego, fold their arms, and bend their back. Let me ask you this. What do you all think about the role of women within the text? Anybody kind of contemplate on that at all while reading this? What is the role of women? Are they subjected? Are they objectified? Are they centered? Are they peripheral? What y'all think about that?
I actually, one of my favorite verses was 21, actually, because to me it showed the value of women and how they're actually appreciated. And I thought that personally I appreciated it because it showed them in a positive light. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Delilah. Anyone else read 21 or anyone's familiar with Passage 21? What did you think about Passage 21, Shah?
I feel like it's kind of the only one that they even mention women, but like she said, I am very glad that they put in a positive light. I feel like number 21 is kind of just making sure that you have that love and that respect and kind of put your wife at a higher honor instead of how we've kind of seen in history to where women were kind of always down and less than. I feel like Patthotep was really trying to not make them, obviously since there's only one mention of them, I would think not just as equal, but from the look of this, it's kind of seeming like they're kind of treating their women, their wife, as like a higher type of like respect, a higher regard, and a higher honor, kind of.
Yeah, I think it's spot on, Shai. But I do want to point out, Wisdom Teaching 37 is also mentions women If you take for a wife a good time woman who is joyful and who is well known in this town, if she is fickle and seems to live for the moment, do not reject her. Let her eat. The joyful person brings happiness. So that's another point where women are mentioned, just to throw that out there. But I think you're all correct. You're both correct about your assessment of passage 21. And what I often find when we engage this passage, I find women believe that this passage objectifies women. And I think you are led to believe that because you're not, one, doing a close read, and then two, you're reading this with the lens of our world today, right? Through a patriarchal world lens. But I think your assessment, Shai, and your assessment, Delilah, is spot on. But for those who are unfamiliar, right? Passage 21. When you prosper, I'm sorry, go ahead, Amelia.
Sorry, yeah, just really quick in reference to the wisdom that you gave, number 37. I was gonna talk about number 18, in which it states to be weary of approaching women, to not cause issue among the men of the home, and to not create bad business like within them. So I feel like yes, they do enamor women, and I was very like it was very nice to see 21, but it also feels like women are only taking up to this like high standard of respect them and take care of them if they are the woman of the household, being that they give birth to children and they're your direct wife. But otherwise, I do see a bit of objectification and like sexualization in the women.
Well, let's deal with 21, then we'll work back to 18. Because I have to kind of push back against, especially the sexualization. Because really, well, let me do 21, then we'll get to that, because I think you bring up a good point. But hear carefully, because again, keep in mind, these are instructions, right? These are instructions. When you prosper and establish your home, so when you get some money and you're able to get your home, right? Love your wife with adore your wife. Then fill her belly and clothe her back. Caress her, give her ointments to soothe her body. Fulfill her wishes for as long as you live. Fulfill her wishes for as long as you live.
Wait a minute. So basically, back in them days, they weren't. What's the term that these men use nowadays? That being a alpha male, they were actually catering to their wives. It wasn't the other way around.
Yep. So to your point, right?
Ironic.
To your point, fulfill her wishes for as long as you live. So this is the man's duty to fulfill the wishes of the wife. Okay.
Right.
She is
That's
a
ironic.
child filled for a husband. But here's the thing, yo. We have to understand, under this European oligarchy, everything has been turned upside down and ass backwards, right? So we're doing the opposite of what we should be doing. Oldest book in the world, right? But again, she is a fertile field for her husband. Do not be brutal. Good manners will influence her better than force. Do not contend with her in the courts. Keep her from the need to resort to outside powers. Her eye is her storm when she gazes. It is by such treatment that she will be compelled to stay with you. So I don't think this objectifies women. Keep in mind, these are the instructions to avoid strife. If you don't want your wife to seek outside powers, this is what you do. Make sure she's fed, make sure she has clothes on her back, make sure she has ointments on her body to smell good, make sure you are fulfilling her needs for as long as you live. By this treatment, she's compelled to stay in your home. In other words, if you don't do this, she has the right to go find someone who will. So no, it's not about the woman being an object. The woman has all the power in this. And the men are being instructed as to what to do because they are the ones who are not handling business. Women don't need instructions because they know what to do. This is why the men are getting these very specified instructions. When you prosper, establish your home, love your wife with adore her. It's very specific, very clear. Michelle, go ahead.
These teachings sound very similar to the Native Americans. So my question is, how is it that these other civilizations that were not conquered by the Europeans, how do they have similar teachings as the Africans?
Well, the Native Americans were conquered by the Europeans. I would argue also, Michelle, not only Native Americans, but I believe you would look at like ancient Asian societies, indigenous Asian societies, you would see some of the very similar type of teachings. For most indigenous cultures, right, these are some of the standards. Is when the advent of what's called modernity, the modern European conquest, you start to see these things change. But let's go to 18 for Amelia's sake. I'm going to read it so we can unpack it. If you want a friendship to endure, in the household that you enter, the house of a master, of a brother or a friend, then in whatever place you enter, beware of approaching the women there. Unhappy is the place where this is done. Unwelcome is he who intrudes on them, on the women. 1,000 men are turned away from their good, because a short moment that is like a dream. And then that moment is followed by death that comes from having known that dream. Anyone who encourages you to take advantage of the situation gives you poor advice. When you go to do it, your heart says no. If you are one who fails through the lust of women, then no affair of yours can prosper. Nowhere in here are women being mentioned as sexualized. In fact, what they're telling you is men, control yourself. I tell you what, somebody come into my house, fuck with my wife or my daughter, it's their ass. This is what it's saying. Unhappy is the place where you go into someone's house and mess with the women of the house. Not about women doing anything. It's about women having the right to do what they want to do within their own house without men coming and fucking that up. So nowhere in here, in my reading of this, do I hear women being sexualized nor objectified, excuse me. Again, it's about policing the behavior of men so that way women can be held on the proper pedestal that they deserve. Amelia, do you see that differently, or do you still feel there's objectification or sexualization? And don't just say, yeah, because I'm the teacher and you believe, like, I like, for real, if you feel differently, let's talk it out.
No, I did. When you had previously mentioned about how it's not so much on talking about what role the woman needs to take, it's more about policing the man, is when I kind of got it. Because initially reading it, when I kind of just saw like the alluring of women and the how it says to not fall into a woman's lust, that's when I didn't kind of realize that it was more directed to tell the man how to get into place in someone else's home.
And it's saying, you know, if you are one who fails through the lust of women, right? So if you can't control yourself as it pertains to your desire for women, then you will not prosper. And I think if y'all, I mean, if you know some men, there's men who cannot control that, and it's very hard for them to prosper, right? So again, it's about the behavior and the policing of the male behavior more than it is the policing of women's behavior, or women being objectified for the men. We get out of here 2:50, right? That's when we close. Shit. I wanted to leave time for fishbowl, but we don't have time for that. We'll pick that up on Wednesday. I'll cover a few more wisdom teachings, and then we'll kind of allow us to hear from you all more. And then again, we'll close out with the fishbowl. Are there any last minute